Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of the Book Blab. And we're excited today because Suzanne's back in Utah for another wedding, and so that means that we get to do it together, which is even more fun than across the distance of many states.
So much better this way.
Yeah. So
if only they could all be like this, right?
I know. Seriously. Anytime you want to move here. Well, Suzanne's actually on her way to Kansas.
Yes.
Right? Is your husband already there?
Yes, he is. He's there with my boys.
So, yeah. So, she's a little closer? Is that closer to Utah?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Driving-wise, it's closer.
Yeah. So, anyway, we are here today to do our mini book blab, or mini book club, that we announced a couple episodes ago. We said that we were going to talk about The Girl Who Drank the Moon and by Kelly Barnhill. And so sorry we didn't give more of a heads up that we were doing it today, but it's today. So if anyone is actually on Facebook today and sees this, you're welcome to join in and talk about this book if you've read it. If you haven't read it, you might not want to watch this.
There will be spoilers.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. We definitely have some things that we want to discuss about the plot of the book that will ruin the book for you. So this book, The Girl Who Drank the Moon, won the Newbery medal this year. And so we thought it might be fun to talk about. And especially since Suzanne doesn't always, she likes middle grade, just doesn't always put it.
It's not a priority.
Yeah. So. And it's not
so it's
quite
good
as
to have
high
the
caliber.
motivation to read this one this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we might talk about that a little bit at the end of the show. But first, we just want to talk about the book itself. So I thought I'd give a little summary of the book just to kind of get us going and refresh our memories a little bit. So the book is fantasy. It takes place in what's called the Protectorate, and every year in this village, the village sacrifices the youngest child of the village to kind of keep the supposed witch of the woods away from the town, to kind of appease her. And so they do that, and it turns out there is a witch in the woods, but she's not evil, and she doesn't need any babies, but she always finds this infant every year in the woods, and so she always takes the baby and takes it across the forest to another village, and
finds cities on the other side of the village.
Yeah, and finds a good home for it. And I think what you realize pretty soon into the book is that kind of the head council of the village, who says that there's a witch in the woods, they actually don't think there is a witch in the woods, right? So they're just doing it to kind of keep the everyone in the village under their hand and kind of oppress them.
Yeah,
and
they're evil. You figure that out pretty soon.
Yes,
they're kind of evil.
Yeah, and so they don't actually think there's a witch in the woods. Turns out there is, and she's not evil. She's good. But anyway, one year, the baby that gets chosen, the mother is very resistant to this, which you would think all the mothers would be, but I think a lot of the mothers feel like it's necessary for their
the populace has been conditioned to give up their children, but this mother fights.
Yes. A lot. So much so that they have to rip her away from her baby, throw her in prison, and they still leave the baby. And the good witch, Zan, her name is Zan, she comes, she finds the baby. She's going to take the baby across the forest to the other cities. And she always feeds the babies starlight to kind of help sustain them on their journey. But she's a little bit distracted by this baby, and she actually gives the baby moonlight instead, and magics the baby, fills her with a lot of magic. And so Zan decides she better raise her.
Yes, because she's going to be a witch too.
Yeah,
someday.
Exactly.
Drinking the moon turns you into a witch.
Right. So she has to keep her safe from herself now that she's filled with all this magic. So anything else we want to say about the
That's a good setup.
Okay.
Yeah, so the story just sort of follows people back in the protectorate, the mother, and another central character is Antane.
Yes. Antane was kind of an apprentice to the council, right?
But he's very disturbed by...
Yes, by mothers having to give up their babies. And so he
super guilty.
Sees this baby being taken into the forest and decides that he's done being on the council, even though that's a pretty esteemed position. But he decides he's done because that's just wrong. And so the girl who gets taken, who gets filled up with magic, her name is Luna. And so we've got Luna and Zan, who's the witch, Antane.
Antane in the protectorate, and then the mother who's locked up.
Yes.
In the protectorate.
Yeah, and she goes a little bit crazy.
Yes, with sorrow.
Yes.
Right. So the book follows Luna as she grows up, and as Zan's trying to teach her, and there's a colorful cast of characters living in the woods with them.
Right.
It's pretty funny. There's a miniature dragon,
Furion,
and a swamp monster,
Glurk.
That's right.
Who's lived since the dawn of time, pretty much.
And Zan's like 500 years old.
Yeah.
Too, right. Anyway. So they're all together in the forest raising this enmagicked infant who ends up being like terrible twos, but terrible twos on magic, which is super intense. So there's fun adventures there. And then it also follows the mother and Antane back in the protectorate and how all their stories come together in the end.
Yep.
And how they all find each other and defeat the bad council and who we find out is the real villain.
Yes, Sister Ignatia.
Yeah. This was a creepy villain.
Yeah,
this was. She was, once you figured out who she was and what she was doing, pretty creepy. Because I liked her at first.
I know. That's the weird thing. Like, you don't have any idea at first that she's going to turn out to be the villain. You think it's more the council.
Right. Which it is, but the council ends up being under her, manipulated by her.
Exactly. So, yeah.
So she is... Do we want to talk about who she is?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, she is the head sister, right? Of the... What are they called? The
sisterhood?
The sisterhood?
Or maybe just the sisters.
Yeah, the sisters. And they're like a nunnery? Or they seem like a nunnery? Or something like that. Where, the sisters enter and they are the only ones in the protectorate that are allowed to learn, read or, gain knowledge and practice all of these interesting things. And so, so she seems like this really educated, enlightened sister in this nunnery, but actually she...
Spoiler! Yes, now we're getting into the spoilers. Turns out she has been keeping all of these people kind of under, oppressing them because she's feeding off of their sorrow. So basically...
she is what they call a sorrow eater.
Yes.
Which I guess is a type of witch or something like that. It's a form of magic. But she is able to live forever and keep herself young looking and healthy and whatever by eating, sorrow. So she needs the people to be unhappy.
Right. And so that is part of the reason why she came up with this great idea to make them sacrifice the youngest child in the protectorate, because that naturally keeps that sorrow going. I really wanted to talk about sorrow and how it plays out in this book and kind of the counter emotion or feeling of hope.
And that was a huge theme in this book.
It was. So early on, Antane, the young man who decides that there's something wrong in the village, he goes to the Tower of the Sisters because he really wants to see the mother of the baby that got locked up. And he wonders, and he says this, I think it was to Sister Ignatia, actually, when you think she's still a little bit more of an ally than she is. But he says to her, he just wonders if this mother will ever be cured of her sorrow, or if she'll just always feel just so sad about her baby. And Sister Ignatia tells him that there is no cure for sorrow. And when I listened to the book, and when I first heard that, it just struck me because I was like, no cure for sorrow. And then, is that true? And then, of course, in the book, you find out, no, it's not. And in real life, it's not either.
Although, yeah, what I think was interesting was how much repressed sorrow there was. Or this idea that sorrow was dangerous. That kept coming up, too. That sorrow was dangerous. And before I understood entirely why sorrow is dangerous, which is because she's a sorrow eater living off of it. That's like the fantasy reason why it's dangerous. But also in life, like sorrow is a horrible emotion to feel. Nobody wants to feel sorrow. And so there was all of this repression of it, or that feeling that it's heavy and there's no cure for it, and we all just have sorrow, and the only way to deal with it was to bury it and to not think about it. Like, that was the only way to deal with it.
Which you find that's actually what Sister Ignatia has done.
Yes.
At the end of the book, that she, as a child, had a huge tragedy happen in her life, and so she took that sorrow and she locked it up in her heart, and that's what turned her into a sorrow eater, right? Yeah, feeding off of other people's sorrow. And I thought about how, just in our own life, I think when we have a tragedy happen to us, something bad happen, we kind of do have a choice. Like, are we going to feed off of our sorrow, or are we going to look for good? Because I think in our life, we could just keep that sorrow going and,
well, and by repressing it, that keeps it there, right? It didn't resolve it. Yeah. And so it was really beautiful. It was to see what ended up being the counter to sorrow.
Yes.
In the town and in like individual people, and that was hope.
Yes.
I loved that in the book. When that started coming out, I was like, oh, this is beautiful.
I know. When we kept seeing how hope was filling these people up, and that even when they started to get that little glimmer of hope, Sister Ignatia started to lose her control over power. Them. Yeah.
And the hope came from just the idea that, maybe we don't have to give up our children. Just that one little idea spurred so much hope in the people. And,
exactly.
What were some of the other things that they, just sunlight being?
Yeah.
Because the protector had always had clouds over it.
Well, and the mad woman, who is Luna's actual mother,
that was really crucial.
Yes, because she is one of the first to really realize that Sister Ignatia is feeding off of her sorrow. And she said that after she got rid of all of her sorrow, only hope remained.
Yes, and hope that her daughter was alive.
Yes. And she she had that driving force, she knew her daughter was alive. She knew she was somewhere. And then Sister Ignatia didn't have control over her anymore, and that made Sister Ignatia very unhappy.
So hope is a cure for sorrow. I mean, I think I would have said happiness is a cure for sorrow.
I think we would have naturally thought that happiness was the opposite.
But thinking of it as a cure, I guess, how do you get to happy?
Right.
Is through hope.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, it was really profound.
So, yes. Definitely. So that was really cool. A cool theme that just kind of ran through the whole book. And you saw it with other characters, too, not just the mad woman. Okay. Do we want to talk about... So, the book is kind of set up... as kind of a story within a story, almost, because you've got those little episodes where there's a mother telling a story to her child. And
stories are big.
Yes. And one of the things that I loved, the idea of stories is a really big theme. And one of the things that I loved was when they said, a story can tell the truth, but a story can also lie. And I think we see that through the whole book, because... Sister Ignatia has all of this control over the protectorate because she's told them a story about a witch in the woods, and it's not a true story.
But it is. That's what's interesting about it. Like nothing about the story was actually false.
Right.
Except for, there was a witch in the woods, and she did take their children.
But Sister Ignatia didn't know that.
No, she did. I guess that's true. That's what's funny about it. Yeah.
Right.
So it ended up, That's what, so the mothers tell their children these stories about this witch in the woods.
Right.
But then other mothers told stories about a witch that eats their sorrow. So anyway, there were all of these stories that were doing both. Telling the truth and misleading.
Telling a lie.
And
yeah,
misleading.
or misleading. Misleading I actually like better than a lie because, it was kind of just taking them to different,
But those stories were powerful. They were powerful for subjecting the people, but then they were also key in, especially for, was it Antane? The madwoman's mother. Those stories were key in her helping figure out the truth.
Yeah.
Figure out who the real witch was.
That's true.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, so those stories did both.
Yep. So, and I think we see that all around us today too. Like out of all of these stories that we're being fed on a daily basis, whether it's in the news or, just word of mouth or other mothers talking to us and telling us like what we should or shouldn't do with our children. I don't know. They're all stories and they all probably have some element of truth to them and some element of falsehood.
I know. And so this is totally reminding me of a discussion that we had in grad school involving... Anyway, I won't go into the grad school discussion. But no, this is like a really interesting way to think about literature. Any sort of literature is that it's a story that has power to teach or to mislead.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Right. And I think the interesting thing about stories is that they can do both. The same story can have elements of truth in it and
elements of
lies
or stories leave out things.
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't tell the entire
truth. So they can spin
truth.
the story the way they want it to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing about stories.
So that was a cool theme. And okay. Now another theme was that of love. So we have sorrow and hope, which love is certainly a part of that because I think you feel sorrow because you have the capacity to love others. And so when something happens to them, that creates sorrow. So I think these are all intertwined, but so you really get a sense though of how big love can be in the story because Luna loves Zan, who becomes kind of her surrogate grandmother.
Right. Raising her. And she doesn't even know for a long time that she's actually kind of been adopted by Zan. But you just see how much she loves Zan and how there's almost this magnetic force that keeps them together, even when they're apart from each other. And then, of course, there's the love of the mad woman.
Yes.
We call her the mad woman, but
that's what she's
known
Luna's
as mother, right?
In the book, she's called the mad woman.
That love... So, magic works interestingly in this book, but anyway. So, that might not be something we need to get into here, like how the magic actually works, because Luna's mother has all sorts of crazy magic going on.
She does have some magic.
That manifests itself through the sorrow, but also through the love. I mean, it's all driven by love for her daughter and this hope that her daughter's still alive and her ability to, like, see her daughter from the tower or to know that her daughter's okay. And it's a really powerful bond that this mother feels towards her daughter. Like, really powerful love.
And it does make it so that she can cross some of those magical boundaries.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because with Luna, you don't think that she, you think that the only reason she's magic is because Zan fed her moonlight as a baby, but then you see that her own biological mother has
all this magic in her.
Yes, and they both have the crescent moon on their forehead, right?
Right. I think so.
Right? Doesn't the mad woman have a crescent moon too?
Yes, I think
which seems weird. So yeah, you wonder how much of the magic is actually from being fed moonlight as a baby and how much maybe came from her mother.
Well, okay. We're getting
but maybe we shouldn't.
We're getting into this. We're going into this because there is a really I didn't understand it. A really strange relationship between love and magic in this book, because Zan obviously loves Luna and loves her enough to raise her as her own daughter. A lot of love there, but somehow the raising of another witch depleted Luna's magic, or
yes.
depleted Zan's magic. As Luna became stronger, Zan's magic depleted, and that we find out happened also with Zan and her.
Yes, her mentor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that there was also a father-daughter relationship there, but her increase in magic decreased his. Anyway.
Yeah,
there's a
it's very
there's like
true.
I still think about this. I'm like, why did it have to be that way?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that the way the magic worked? What and there is something, it has something to do with the relationship, with
yes,
the love, with the
it does
mentoring.
seem like that. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know what that relationship is. Any other ideas out there?
Yeah, if anyone read it,
what are your thoughts about this relationship between
love and magic,
and one increasing and the other decreasing? I don't know. Anyway,
right. Was there, let's see, sorry. I did like this one. I'm going to just share a quote that I really liked from About Love. There were a couple of really good love quotes in the book. But one thing is Luna is kind of trying to figure everything out, and she realizes that she does have magic in her. She realizes that her mother is out there somewhere. And the book said, how many feelings can one heart hold? Luna looked at her grandmother, her mother, the man protecting his family, which was Antane, and she thought, infinite. Mm-hmm. Luna, the way the universe is infinite. It is light and dark and endless motion. It is space and time and space within space and time within time. And she knew there is no limit to what the heart can carry.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful quote.
And I think part of the reason I love that is, so I think most of you know I just had a baby, and it's our 5th baby. And I think sometimes, at least after I'd had my first, and I just felt so much love for him, it was hard for me when I was pregnant with my second, just to think, like, how can I love this second child as much as I love my first child?
How am I ever going to be able to pay attention to my second child? Because I'm so,
right. And I just felt like, my heart was already filled up to capacity with this one child, so I didn't know how I would be able to. I thought I'd be able to love my second child. I just didn't know if I could love him as much. And the crazy thing is that quote is true. There is no limit to what the heart can carry and the love that the heart can feel. And I feel like that is true even now with a 5th child. You just feel more love. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I loved that in the book.
And then watching the siblings love all the younger children too. And you're just like, I love you now even more because of how much you love this. I mean, like, yeah, there's so much love.
Yes. And you see that in the book, that Luna, she has all these people or creatures that she loves. She loves Zan, and she loves Furion, and she loves Glurk. And then all of a sudden she finds her own mother, and she loves her too. And
she does wonder, though, like, how could I love Zan is my mother figure, right? How could I love another mother? But you can't, like she does.
Yep.
There's enough love for everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, that is a beautiful thing.
Sorry, I'm just checking our time. I don't know how long we've been going.
That's all right.
We could go forever.
we could. There is a lot to talk about with this book.
Really,
like, a lot. It was a long book.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much in it.
Yeah, there really was. So, okay. One thing that I want to talk about before we maybe talk about, like, the merits of the book itself and winning the Newbery. So we've already talked about how Sister Ignatia is this really evil and kind of creepy villain, and pretty disturbing also because she's feeding off the sorrow.
Right.
But then all of a sudden at the end you get a little bit more of Sister Ignatia's backstory, and you find out that she's had this big tragedy, and that her way of coping with it was to kind of close up her heart and instead feed off the sorrow of others instead of her own sorrow, or instead of dealing with her own sorrow.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I felt this twinge of empathy at that point. Did you?
Definitely. Which is the mark of a good villain.
It is. But at the same time, I thought about this, and it was almost like once I knew about her more human side, I was a little bit frustrated because I was like, I just want to hate her. Like, she's so evil. She's like hurt so many people. And I'm like, oh, now I feel a little bit of sympathy for you. And
I think that's a good thing.
Did you?
I do.
No, I think it is.
I think it's I think it's good to humanize villains and to make them. It makes them more complicated.
It does,
and it also makes their evilness more of a tragedy too. I feel like.
So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just as a reader,
really
I'm like, oh well, now I can't just hate you. Like I have to take all this into consideration. And it was interesting because right when I was finishing this book, I was reading this other book called A House in the Sky, which is nonfiction. It's a memoir about this woman who was captured in Somalia and held for ransom for 15 months and abused in horrible ways. Yes. But even she, like after I think she'd been in captivity for maybe a year, she gets to kind of the breaking point. And it's interesting that the breaking point is actually when she starts to feel a little bit of compassion for her captors. And just that they have grown up in this war-torn country and that they've seen their loved ones murdered and killed. And anyway, and in that case, you're like, this is a true story. And they have done horrendous things to this person. And yet, all of a sudden, they become a little bit more human. And you see what's going on.
Oh, that's powerful.
And it's a little bit harder, I think, in that situation. In a fantasy... it's fantasy. But then all of a sudden in real life, you're like, okay, even in real life, the villains of real life have human emotions too. So, anyway, deep things in this book. And let's talk a little bit about the Newbery.
Okay.
And if it was deserving of this Newbery. Not that we even have any...
we can judge because we love books.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk about this. Yeah, did it deserve the Newbery? So when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, this is a really different choice for a Newbery. It's like, this is different. This is interesting. I'm not sure I would have chosen it for the Newbery. I liked that it was fantasy because I don't feel like fantasy is a huge genre represented in Newbery. I mean, there are some.
I mean, I can think of not very many. Most of them tend to be realistic fiction, at least from my perspective, realistic fiction that are dealing with really hard family issues.
Right. That does tend to be a lot of them. But there have been some fantasy in the past. And anyway, so I like that. I was like, I like they're branching out into a different genre. How did you feel about the fantasy? Because I know fantasy.
Okay,
so I want to know.
This is the interesting thing. Okay, so Suzanne and I both came at this book from kind of a different angle. Mine was that fantasy is not my
favorite
genre of choice. Yes. And Suzanne's was that middle grade fiction isn't really your maybe go-to genre as much.
Right.
And so we both came at it with maybe a few prejudices already. But, I mean, for me, I actually loved this book so much, and I was surprised by it. And, it was interesting because I kept thinking, this won the Newbery, and it is interesting that a fantasy book won the Newbery, but I was like, oh my goodness, this book... First of all, I thought it was beautifully written. And so if I was just looking at the writing by itself, I think, I felt like that kind of had some merit and made it a little bit more outstanding. And then the characters I thought were great because they were very three-dimensional. And you could see, like we were talking about with Sister Ignatia, she was not just this bad villain, but she had another side to her.
Characters.
Yes, so complex characters. And then just all of the themes that we've already talked about in this book, I felt like really, I felt like they gave the book merit. And that it wasn't just a fun fantasy story, but I felt like all of these themes made me think about things in a new way. And that, to me, is the mark of a great book. But I don't know. Now, what did you think?
Okay, so what did I think? So I had some conflicting emotions about it. So I started off loving it because of the fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
which I do. I love fantasy genre. I loved the fantasy elements of it. I loved the world building of it, and like you said, like okay. Well, then the middle happened.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I will say that the middle lost me a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
So like we talked about it being a long book,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of points where I was like, this should have been edited. I feel like this should have been
That's
edited down for a middle grade audience.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was okay. So I'm obviously keeping the audience in mind when I read middle grade,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm thinking, if I were a 10-year-old girl, would I be interested in this? Anyway, and I think it was a little too long. I do.
Interesting. And I wonder, it actually took me a really long time to listen to, because like I would stop listening for like a couple weeks at a time and then get back into it. But when I was actually listening to it, I never felt that the pacing was slow.
I felt like in the middle, just in her between the ages of like 3 and 13 or whatever, in there the story got a little bogged down.
Yeah.
Is that the word? Or I felt like it got a little confusing too, about like Zan was going off on trips, but then like coming back. I felt like the timeline got there's a lot of jumping back. There's a lot of jumping back and forth between what's happening in the Protectorate and what's happening in the forest, what's happening in the cities.
Yes.
And sometimes I felt like that timeline wasn't seamless. Okay, so but these are minor things. I just want to point out that these are minor things.
No, these are good though.
They weren't huge, but there were a few in the middle of it where I was just like, gosh, I'm just not sure that this was like the storyline wasn't smooth enough for me or something like that.
Well,
but I will say by the end, when all of these themes really started coming together and like really, when I started figuring out what she was doing with some of these ideas, I appreciated it a lot more. And I was like, oh, no. Like, this is really, there's so much to dig through here. There's a lot to think about, and there's some really good stuff going on.
Right.
It was just that middle slog.
And I can see that. So a lot of the middle grade fiction that I read, lots of times, I like it, but then I'm like, would a child
actually
who
like
it's written for actually be able to get through this? And the truth is, a lot of the books that are coming out right now are big, thick books, and I feel like they're not.
I know. And
great for kids.
That was something I was thinking. I was just not sure how. I guess we need to ask a kid.
Yeah. Well, we might get to, because after I read it, I was like, I'm going to get this, I'm going to buy this book, and I'm going to give it to Aaron, and we're going to see how he likes it.
I really want to know.
Yeah.
I really want to know how
Not that he'll be really eloquent with what he'll probably just say yes or no.
No, it'll be a good, that'll be like a good normal
and I can actually
review.
Usually tell if he likes a book or not, because if he likes it, he finishes it in 2 days. And if he doesn't,
so good. I'm excited
it takes
to
him
hear
several
what he
weeks.
thinks about it.
So we'll see. But yeah, for me, I was like, as an adult, I loved it, and I didn't feel like I was reading a kid's book. Exactly. So which is probably a bad sign. I mean, the characters are young. But
maybe it's why I enjoyed it more than I do enjoy most middle. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, but because I did like it.
Yeah.
I did. I just had that thought the whole time that like, this isn't for kids.
Yeah. I don't know.
But it is. But at the same time, it is. Anyway.
Right. Because its protagonist is a child.
Right.
But
so I felt some
kind of
tension.
As adults who are.
But as far as being deserving of the Newbery, I do think it was. I don't know if it's one I would have picked, but thinking about it and thinking about how much, I think it was.
I think so,
and I'm
too.
glad they chose it.
I am really happy that they chose it, and I don't even like fantasy that much. And I thought it was a great choice because of the things I already mentioned. But anyway, so yes, hopefully some of you who have read it can comment on our blogs or here on Facebook.
And let us know your thoughts.
Yeah. On any of the things that we've talked about, the themes or Newbery deserving.
Yeah.
So speaking of Newbery, so we always recommend a book at the end of the segment, and so, or at the end of the episode. And so we thought today would be fun to recommend one of our favorite Newbery winners from a past year. So
okay, so I actually went back and reviewed the list of all the Newberys, and oh my gosh, it was so hard.
There are a lot of good ones.
So many good ones. So many good ones. But I think I will have to always and forever go with The Giver.
Yes. Good choice.
I know. It's just I read it at a time when it was the best book I've ever read, and I just can't let go of that feeling. Cool. And I've reread
before
it too.
You were an adult, I guess.
Yes.
So you would have given it 5 stars as a kid.
Oh yeah, I loved it, and I feel like that one was very different for Newberys at the time.
Yeah.
It's a futuristic sci-fi.
It's kind of that dystopian, which now dystopian novels are
all over the place.
Yes, everyone's coming up with a dystopian.
But this one was very original and still the best.
Her own idea.
No dystopian has ever come close to The Giver.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's got to be. Yeah. All right, so I'm excited. What's yours?
Okay, well, I don't think I went through my list and was like, which is like the one that I just, loved the most, even as a child or even now. I don't know. The one I went with, I would recommend it, but okay. The way I'm starting this makes it sound like I'm not.
There's a lot.
There are a lot of good ones. And actually, as I was just going back through my list of ones that I've read as an adult, I was like, most of these I've given 4 or 5 stars to. So I guess most of the Newbery ones actually are good. But the one that I decided to recommend for today's, and I think part of the reason I chose this one is because even though it won the Newbery fairly recently, I don't hear about it that often, so I'm like, maybe people don't know about this one, and it's a good one. So it's called When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. Have you read it?
It's been on my to-read list for a long time. Haven't gotten around to it yet. Okay.
But yeah, it's a great story. Very, it's different too. And so maybe all Newbery books are different. Maybe they don't follow a theme. Yeah. But it was great. And if you like A Wrinkle in Time, it kind of has some similar elements.
Which also was a Newbery.
It was, yep. So I don't want to give anything away because a lot of it I didn't know about before. But it's a good one. Yeah. So, and I've even read it. I've read it twice as an adult. So that says something, right? Yeah, if I've actually revisited it as an adult.
Yeah. So rereading's a big sign.
Yeah, I know. Because we don't have a lot of time to get to all the books we want to read. So if we're going to reread some, that's the mark of a good book. So I should probably own it, actually. Because that's one of my ways that I...
Yeah, if you're going to reread it, you got to own it.
Figure out if I want to own it or not. But anyway, so thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Book Blab. And like I said, in a few days, we'll have the show notes up with this video. And we'd love for you to come and chime in on your thoughts on The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. So
this was so fun.
Yep. And next month, we will not be together.
No, unfortunately.
But we will come back, though, with another episode in about a month. And we look forward to seeing you then. Bye.
Bye.